Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and for lack of having a witty introduction today, I will introduce Mr. Brian E. Roach, who one of our editors here, Eric Herman, said would have been very helpful for a trivia night since he's a millennial and Brian is not, and there was a lot of old-timey trivia like MASH and some other stuff. So, Brian, I'm going to kick it to you for the introduction this time.
Well, I am just thrilled beyond words, and let me just say this. I'm not that old, but okay. Nonetheless, let me introduce myself as the Smokey to your Bandit.
Yeah, I can't. I don't have a real frame of reference for that one. That one's on the bucket list still, believe it or not. There's just some things that have flown by my attention. And as you have movies that come out, geez, it used to be like there was like maybe one or two blockbusters a month, and then it was every week, and now it's like there's 2 or 3 a week. You can't keep up with all the noise. You got Netflix and Hulu and all these different things that are just, vying for your attention. But one thing that caught our attention, we kind of lied about the programming. Of course, it won't be a lie unless Brian doesn't have a mock draft for Monday. And then, of course, look for us later in the week for the actual draft because we're right around the corner. But we had some news we wanted to address, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers as well as the NFL schedule released just the other day, and we wanted to complain about it. So, and here we are on our soapbox and ready to yell at clouds.
Absolutely. I'm always ready to yell at clouds.
Well, week one, we'll just get right into this. Week one, are you really? I don't know if I'm happy about playing. I don't like playing at New England. That should not be a surprise. I don't like playing New England. That should not be a surprise. And I definitely don't want to be there for a Sunday night football game week one when they're raising their stupid banner. They don't even have room for more banners. This one's more irritating because it's their 6th Super Bowl, which ties them with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that makes me an unhappy camper. Now, the one thing I do kind of like about this positioning is they don't have to be distracted. Remember before they're looking ahead at the Patriots and all this other jazz, you know what I mean? Yep. That's what they're going to be doing all of training camp. They should be angry. They should be practicing angry, and they should be very well prepared, maybe a head start. And the only thing that really sucks, though, Brian, is we know that they're never prepared in the month of September.
Yeah, here's what I'm taking away from this game. I'm quite content to get it out of the way early. I'm quite content to open up there. I'm quite content to have them unfurl the banner in front of the noses of the team, because if that doesn't give them a incentive, if that doesn't bother them, well, then what is going to? I think it can. And as much as we're not usually prepared, remember, the Patriots don't look real good early in the season either and haven't the last couple years. So I kind of look at this and think, there's good and bad. I'm willing to deal with it and hope for the best. That's the one thing about this schedule that I'm the least concerned with at this point, I think.
The one thing that I don't like, this game should have been a Thursday game. And then this could have given the Steelers like a little bit of a mini bye heading into their home opener. It would have been very nice because then they have all this time to prepare for the Patriots. Instead, it's the Packers and the Bears. And everybody's selling it as, it's the oldest probably the oldest rivalry in the NFL. You get the Browns and Steelers, but that doesn't predate this. So, but who cares? Okay, the Bears were on the comeuppance last year, and the Packers were on a downslide, and that could be interesting. But doesn't the Super Bowl champion usually? That's one of the perks too. You get to play early. You get to play on that Thursday. That's part of the ratings draw. It's the Super Bowl champion, and then they get that mini bye. And if you really wanted this rematch from, the last few seasons that have been close or semi-close and competitive games between the Steelers and Patriots, I mean, geez, we're playing them constantly, which is just irritating, almost as much as irritating as playing the Chiefs. But alas, that's only in the preseason this year. So, that's the real thing that bothers me about week one, is because now you got a primetime game to start on a Sunday on the road, and that's less time to prepare. It already I think the Steelers should be used to primetime games. What do they got? 5 of them, and I mean there's 2 Monday night games and a Thursday night game mixed in here too. I don't understand the multiple Monday nights, but hey, whatever. I'll take it, I guess. But it's just it's setting them up on some short weeks here. Of course, they have a lot of West Coast travel, playing the NFC West this year, and I don't know. With the Patriots there, that's one thing I would have liked to see. You jump into week 2, and I know some people, people freak out about this. There's one thing myself and Brian spoke about, off the air here, and we're not necessarily we could kind of give a prediction. We're still building rosters here. We don't know what's going to go on. We don't know if people are going to get hurt in training camp and preseason games and all this other jazz. Tom Brady goes down, it could wreck the Patriots' year. Russell Wilson doesn't sign that contract. What did Seattle do? You know what I mean? So they get the Seahawks, and they get them for a 1 o'clock, which is actually very advantageous for the Steelers. There's no flex scheduling this early in the year, so this game shouldn't be bumped back like they did with that Chargers game last year into a primetime slot where it's more, more beneficial or more fair for that West Coast team. In all reality, this game should be played at, 4:25 or 4 whatever. I think they're all 4:25s now. They used to be 4:15s. They bumped it an extra 10 minutes because a lot of people were getting angry. Some of these games were going to OT and stuff, and they were missing it, and they would cut off to the, local teams or whatever the feed might be. And that happened to me with the stupid Browns and Dolphins the year that they didn't win a single game, or they only won the one game. Oh. Yeah, it cut into the one Steelers game, and I think that was the Eagles game, a week 3 game, where the only series that the Steelers were any good was the one I missed due to the other game with the regional coverage. So lo and behold, I had nothing positive to take back from that game. It still haunts me. So anyways, I mean, to get the Seahawks here, it's not like the Seahawks have been the most amazing team in years. I think they're well coached. I think they're they're one of the top franchises still. So I mean, a lot of people are already speaking doom and gloom and saying, oh, well, they're going to lose 2 games. Hold on. We don't know who's going to win or lose. We still haven't had an NFL draft yet.
Yeah, it's way too early. I mean, people are going to do it anyway, and if you're going to, why not be optimistic about it like our boy Zach Adonia did and just say they're going to go 17-0. That's right, 17-0, because they're going to win the bye. But,
nice.
Yeah, realistically, it is just far too early to have enough information to legitimately look at these games and say, yeah, they're going to win, they're going to lose. We don't know the ultimate makeup of the team. Every year I break this schedule down into 4 quarters and do my novella of the schedule for the website. And I try to wait until even into training camp because you just don't know what you've got yet. And it's real difficult to really try and say, I think they're going to win, I think they're going to lose. Until you have a sense of that, and especially this year with the Steelers, we need to get a sense of, is James Washington going to be a threat? Is he going to blossom a little bit? How does he look? What is Juju going to do as the number 1? How are Ben and Moncrief going to gel? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and while we think that most of those answers are going to be positive, we aren't going to know that for a while. And in addition to that, do they address what they need to address in the draft? Do they get the pieces to the puzzle that they're missing? And how is that going to impact things? It's just too early. But it's still early enough to complain about the things we don't like.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's more or less I'm looking at travel I'm looking at where the other teams, when and where they're playing, when they have byes, when they have short weeks, when they have long weeks. I don't think we get anybody that's on a short week that I noticed. That I may have missed it in combing over the schedule, but it seems like the Steelers are on short weeks more than others, with a Thursday night game and 2 Monday night games, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. But the Seahawks were 10-6 last year. They made the postseason by virtue of the rest of the NFC West laying down the 49ers, losing Garoppolo, and then playing guys we've never heard of, like from a D3 college or whatever. I can't remember the guy's name. He was like a phenom for like one game. Arizona Cardinals, of course, have the number 1 overall pick because they were terrible. The Atlanta Falcons and Carolina Panthers laid down last year with 7-9 records. The Vikings bowed out at the very end, as well as the Packers, who we already mentioned, kind of just disappeared off the map last season too. So, I mean, that NFC was kind of ripe for the picking. Even the Eagles snuck in with a 9-7 record, which, if the Steelers didn't have like the stupid, tie and everything, they should have, been in there over the Ravens, which I will continue to slam the gavel on consistently throughout up until we probably play them and then win the division this year. So hot take alert. Actually, it's not that hot. I'm pretty settled on that, to be completely honest. Even for what people feel the Steelers lost, there's a lot that they kept from last season. So not as many holes to fill as some people think. I like the 10 picks too, Brian. I mean, you'll be talking mock drafts, and I got one coming up on the site here over the weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and where players fall. What did Derek Overley, one of our newest writers, welcome Derek, just had a mock draft too, and then he was talking about there's like 83 first-round picks if you take everyone's first-round picks from these mock draft analysts. So take it for what you will. Okay, so Seahawks, September 15th, that's week 2. Week 3, then, the Steelers got to go West Coast, where, they sucketh all the time, and play the 49ers. It's it's an afternoon game there, so it's not like they're 4:25, so their bodies will be somewhat adjusted to that. It's like a normal 1 o'clock game, just with some extra travel, 4.5 hours, 5 hours for a flight out to San Francisco. So, yep. We talk about the Steelers always being there's this stigma that they're a bad road team, but they haven't really been a bad road team over at least the last 2 years. And, so they went to Jacksonville and kind of sucked, but came out with a win. They lost against Denver. They lost against Oakland. They should have never maybe lost those games in New Orleans. But prior to that, I mean, they were doing pretty well. And even the year before is where they tore off a lot of those games in that win streak. So, I'm not so worried about all this travel. Everybody has to travel. The West Coast thing kind of plays with you a little more with your sleep, a little more air miles, a little more jet lag, whatever be the case. And they got to go to San Francisco, and they also got to go to Los Angeles for the Chargers, and they got to go out to Arizona as well, which, that's quite a bit. And it sucks, just so happens that the Chargers kind of fall into that scheduling based on they were a wild card team and the Steelers were second place in their division, so that's how that lines up. So they nearly dodged a bullet not having to go to Los Angeles, but then you got to go to Los Angeles anyways because you got to play the Chargers. Instead, they host the Rams. So San Francisco, I mean, I don't know what to think of them until we get to see something. By this time, hopefully, all the kinks are worked out with the Steelers themselves, because it's almost like an extension of the preseason, as we're always talking about, into September. People will be talking about the Steelers are over, stick a fork in them. They'll be talking about that with the Patriots again. It always happens. So, and then these are the teams that are always in the mix at the end. Then they come back around week 4, and at home, they're hosting the Bengals for a Monday night game. And that doesn't bother me so much, getting the extra day, as much as week 5. Okay, you stack home games, but now you have a short week to prepare for the Ravens. That's the thing that sucks for me right here.
Yeah, look, I want to say something about this West Coast thing, because while the Steelers have not been a bad road team, there is very little debating that they've been a bad West Coast travel team, but that's not unique to the Steelers. Most of the East Coast teams, when they travel west, and most of the West Coast teams, when they travel east, have some difficulty. So you're absolutely right in saying that the fact that that's a 4:25 game benefits them, just like the 1 o'clock game is a detriment to the Seahawks. It stinks, but I do agree with you. I'd rather have that extra day. Maybe they get there a little early, they acclimate a little more, and the fact, they get the extra day on the way back, so that they're set. It would be one thing if that Baltimore game was a Thursday night game. A Sunday night game, they lose one day, which probably what means that Tomlin may not give them the one day off that they usually get on Monday, and maybe a lighter day on Tuesday than normal. But it would be much worse, obviously, if they were coming off of that game and had a Thursday night game. But, it's where it starts. And the benefit of having that short week and being at home can't be overstated either, by the way. The fact that they're not going to have a short week and have to travel means they get to sleep in their own beds. It's a benefit to a certain extent. So while it sucks to have a short week, to have to go get your Ravens fix on, it's not as bad as it could have been. The beginning of the schedule could have been worse than it is. But that's okay because they made up for it later.
Well, I mean, that's about the only bright spot maybe is that they get the 2 back-to-back home games there, and then you have 3 out of 4. And then when you go with the 5 games, now they're going back out to L.A. They got a rematch with the Chargers on Sunday night, assuming it stays that way. Chargers make the postseason. Chargers were hot last year. Chargers play in a soccer stadium that's very tiny and is going to be filled with lots of Steelers fans. So that's, I think, the one thing that's kind of the benefit here. But when you're looking at the games that are the highest price so far, secondary market tickets as far as like your StubHubs or NFL Ticket Exchange, the highest one obviously is the opener with the New England Patriots. That's because there's demand from the Patriots and Steelers fans, obviously, both there. The Chargers one is significantly less, but more than any other. So we're talking about ticket prices starting at $387 at New England. The Chargers are at $221, and none of these other games are even in the 200s, nor are they even eclipsing 150 at this point in time. So this is the hot ticket. It looks like a lot of people are wanting to go out to California, and maybe even perhaps there's some transplants when it comes to fans that are out there. I know there's a significant California, base of Steelers fans as well, and I know they're planning on hitting all these games when it comes to San Francisco and LA and Arizona, being on the West Coast. So they do that. That's week 6. We're in mid-October. Week 7 is their bye. I know some people may complain about that. That's just about in the middle, so I'm all right with that. 7, 8, 9, that's okay. I think anything before that's too early. Anything after that is could be too late. Doesn't necessarily hurt to have a later bye, but just for rest, you know what I mean? Maybe you're a bit more banged up, so it's going to make this second leg of the schedule from week 8 on maybe more of a grind because they're not necessarily going to get all of this rest. So far, we're talking about the Steelers being back-to-back at home and whatnot. So now they get this huge stretch where they basically don't go anywhere from October 13th until November 14th. They have a bye week, and they have 3 straight games at home. Again, Monday night game again, this time against the Miami Dolphins, and then they host the Indianapolis Colts as well as the Los Angeles Rams, which that will be an afternoon game. And then that's before they start to do the big traveling at the second half here. So it's kind of nice to get to sit at home, sleep in their own beds, as you said, for almost basically a full month.
Yeah, I'm a little aggravated. I mean, I get the way the schedule works. It aggravates me that when you have the AFC or the NFC West on your schedule, that they throw in the Chargers in Los Angeles. So because you're going to get 2 long trips already, now you've got the third. So that Chargers game really kind of does aggravate me. But there's going to be some payback in that game, I think, because we as we know, hashtag the refs stink. That game was a gift.
Yeah.
And,
well, you know what else? The Chargers get the host. They're at home, so that's back-to-back for them as well, leading into that.
So, and I concur with you about the bye. I have no problem with where the bye is. It actually bothers me that we get the extra day for a Monday coming off the bye. I would rather have a Sunday game so that we have a full week following, because now we have another essentially short week off the bye. The Dolphins, if we lose to the Dolphins in Pittsburgh, I can't even tell you what will happen. Yinzers will lose their mind because that's a team that is just making no bones about the fact that they're giving up on this season.
we weren't making those predictions yet. There's still a draft. There's still a draft.
I'm not making the prediction. I'm just saying, no matter what the Dolphins do in the draft, that's a game I feel confident in saying they ought to win.
I mean, come on now. I mean, they only got rid of Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, they stink.
Well, I mean, they stunk even with him, to be completely honest. Yeah. And what was it? There was a game people were playing. Name how many Dolphins can you name?
Can you name 4 Dolphins?
Yeah, I'm actually. I just pulled up their roster because I forgot they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, they did have Brock Osweiler for a minute. It's just, wow. I guess, maybe Fitzmagic again. I mean, he gets to stay in Southern Florida, so, I mean, that's kind of nice for him. Or not necessarily Southern Florida, but down south, I guess. More Southern Florida, because Tampa is actually known as Southern Florida. But anyways, hey, look, they have Ricardo Lewis. I was just talking about him on the last one. So we found out where he ended up. He landed on his feet in Miami. I don't know necessarily. He probably went from worst to worst. So yeah. From Cleveland to Miami. There was something I was going to mention here, and let me see. I had somebody else's schedule up and not the Steelers. That would have been bad. Everybody would have been like, we're not playing that team. And so the Rams, they have a bye, and then they come to Pittsburgh. So they play in London against the Bengals, and that's one of their, quote, home games, which is technically not. It's in the UK. So they have to travel from LA to the UK, and then the NFL usually does you the favor of giving you a bye after you play an international game like that. So they get a bye, and they get all this time to recuperate before traveling once again back to Pittsburgh, going from West Coast to East Coast. That's one thing that could be beneficial even with that bye, because if they were coming, let's say, straight from the UK, they may have just stopped on the East Coast somewhere for the week and, got rid of all that jet lag and been more prepared. I know the 49ers are prone to do that, as some other teams, where they'll come over. In fact, former owner Eddie DeBartolo, and still one of the Yorks are still operational there, Denise York DeBartolo, and that they're all Youngstown natives. So I know this, being Youngstown, Ohio, being my hometown, that their headquarters, they still have the DeBartolo headquarters still has a giant 49ers logo on it. So if you ever drive through Youngstown, Ohio and see that, it's the oddest thing, because you're seeing San Francisco, California pro football team logos in, all the way across the country. So they would stop in Youngstown often, even during the Super Bowl years, the Bill Walsh years and all that. And they would stay there. They would practice at the local college or one of the high schools, because there's several big, state powerhouse football programs that have nice facilities as well. And this is some of the things that they would do. Now, with a bye week in the middle of that, I don't think the Rams are going to stay for 2 weeks on the East Coast and these guys be away from their families and all this and that. That would be a bigger distraction. So that kind of helps there. The thing that now sucks is, though, you go from the Steelers playing the Rams, which, if the Rams are the way they were last year, that's a tough contest. They're coming off a bye as well. The only advantage you may have is that they're traveling to the East Coast, but it's an afternoon game of 4:25. Then the Steelers have to play a divisional game. So not only do they not get a 1 o'clock kickoff on that Sunday, they have, even those 3-4 hours or whatever, you're set back to starting to prepare against the Cleveland Browns for a Thursday night football game in Cleveland right after that. And the Browns just happen to have back-to-back home games right there, so the Browns aren't going anywhere that Sunday. They get to sit at home and get a jump start to this game.
Yeah, this is where the schedule really starts to aggravate me. I don't have a problem with the Colts game. I think we get a little benefit with the Rams game, even though it's at a 4:25 start. So it's kind of better for them. But to give us, you are talking about a physical team, a team that had and continues to have a very good. Any team with Aaron Donald in it is going to have a solid defense. So you're talking about a team that is from what we got. If you're going to play the NFC West, this is a team that can beat you up a little bit, and then we start into. It's not just the fact that it's Cleveland. It's 3 straight divisional games. And Cleveland on a short week in Cleveland. Now, admittedly, that's not a lot of travel.
No, that's true. That's a bus trip, but
It still is frustrating because it's at Cleveland, and you follow that up with at Cincy. To turn around and then have Cleveland again at home. That's a rough stretch, and people who think we're not giving the Browns enough credit this year because we're somewhat skeptical that they can manage all these personalities. Also, don't listen when we say they're a better team. We said it last year, and they were a better team, and their defense can be very dominating. And they've got a front seven that can be solid. They don't always play that way, but they can.
Yeah.
And no matter what else, they and the Steelers don't like each other. And that is, this is younger brother, older brother kind of nonsense. They want to win those games probably more than they want to win any other games on their schedule, except maybe the Ravens. And so that's it. I mean, you got teams that want to beat you, and then you got the Bengals who we all hate and who hate us. Although maybe that rivalry be tempered down some since, Perfect the Clown is no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing here, and you hit the nail on the head. It's not that I'm necessarily downplaying the Browns. I didn't even downplay the Browns last year, and a lot of people did, and that was the initial everyone crying about the way the season started when there was a tie. And when you're playing in inclement weather like you are, that's one thing. I understand the Browns didn't win a game the previous year. They were in a lot of them. Even last year, there's a lot of games that went to OT. I don't downplay divisional games ever. And you see what the Browns and the Ravens did with each other. Cleveland ended up beating them at home and nearly beat them in Baltimore, which we were all praying they would have done, and they just couldn't come away. They ended up doing Browns things. So, Cleveland doesn't have to go anywhere. Of course, that travel's not too terrible, but it's still a road game. Could be a hostile environment. Could be. The reason I say this is that, Cleveland for the last at least decade going up to Cleveland has been almost like another home game as well. Their fans, since they've been bad, especially as the season wears on. Now, if they're not doing so hot, this is week 11, you could see a plethora of Steelers fans. And some people, they try and downplay it. They're like, oh, you said that half of First Energy Stadium's filled with Steelers fans. No, literally, it is half of the Cowboys fans that travel well, or anybody else that has a fan base like that. They fill that stadium because the fans will sell these tickets for 3 and 4 times the price, and people will pay for it to see their team closer to their home if they happen to be living around Cleveland, or even the people and just say, hey, you know what, it's a short road trip to go from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, and that's the way I've always done it. In the past, the last 2 have been both on week 1, and I've had to miss out on them because these, the Browns haven't shown us who they were yet. So these people were able to get what they were asking for these tickets. Now you revert back to being in the middle of the year. If they're doing well, it might be a more pro Browns, what do you want to say, audience or attendance that's there. So, then they got to play at Cincinnati. Now, they get kind of a mini bye for this, and Cincinnati's another one of those places that gets invaded with Steelers fans, whether they like to admit it or not. They're kind of, they're about to be the new Browns. They're about to be, maybe a 4-win team, maybe, if they don't get their act together. I know they got a new coaching staff and things like that, so maybe people won't be as complacent, but they got a lot of work to do. And that fan base itself, it just doesn't exist. They've always been, fair weather, and that's because the Bengals can't win postseason games, and even when they make trips, they barely, they get some interest by the time there's the postseason, but when it's a regular season game in Cincinnati, it's usually an easy ticket to acquire for anybody who's an away fan. I know Dolphins fans that have driven across state 4 or 5 hours to go down to Cincinnati to go see the Dolphins, because, they're not going to fly down to Miami or whatever, go see their team, and they go down there and they said there's a bunch of Dolphins fans there, and we know Dolphins fans don't really travel. So, it's just one of those things with the Bengals, and, we make fun of these teams, but it's still a divisional game. It's a 1:00 Sunday. At least they get a little bit of extra time here, and the Bengals have to play on the West Coast the week before, so they could be reeling a little bit when they host the Steelers. Then, as you already alluded to, 3 divisional games in a row. It goes Cleveland, Cincinnati, now Cleveland again. So we would have already seen 2 weeks before, maybe a little over 2 weeks before, due to the Thursday night, who the Browns are, and it's going to be a rematch one way or the other, no matter who wins. And Cleveland, actually, I'm going to pull this up. I think I had them 3 games at home, including the one that they have against us, before they actually have to come to Heinz Field. And I'm going to verify that here in a second.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
Oh, wait. Let me rephrase that. They have 1 game at home before they come to Heinz. Oh, no,
they have 3. It's Buffalo.
3 at home.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
So they play
Bills, Steelers, Dolphins.
Steelers, and Dolphins. So we're sandwiched in the middle there, where they get to sit at home, and then they're still at home, and then they have that mini bye against the Dolphins, and then it's back. Everything gets reset just like it does for us. So now they will go to. They'll come to Heinz Field, and we're going to get to see what what this all looks like. We're going to be December 1st. After that, there's only 4 games left. We're going to know where everyone is, where the division pretty much stands, because there's only one more divisional game at Baltimore the final week of the season. They like to schedule it that way. That could be an AFC North decider. That final game has been a few times, and a few times it's been a complete dud in terms of actually playing like the Browns or the Bengals, who are already out of it. But then the Steelers got to go to Baltimore. So, having said all that, a little long-winded here, Brian. Sorry. I was just going to jump right into another almost West Coast trip to Steelers West. That may actually be well attended by a lot of transplanted fans in Arizona. There's a lot of transplanted fans, period, just because Steelers Nation is so large. They get to host the Buffalo Bills. Then they got to go to the Jets and also the Ravens to close this out. The notes that I had on here was Arizona has a late bye in the year. They host the Rams, so they're at home. Then they're at home against the Steelers again, and they're actually home against the Browns after that too. So they have a bye late in the year, and then 3 straight home games, and the Steelers are in the middle of that. So it's another one of these things where they're playing a team that you put in the travel, and you got to put it all into perspective. They play these away games, the travel and stuff, and playing with noise and everything like that. There's actual advantages to this for those home teams when you're playing on the road.
Absolutely, there is. I don't want to reemphasize. I want to reemphasize something you said about the Browns, specifically going into Cleveland on that Thursday night game. There's a reason that is looked at as a primetime game this year, not just because the Browns have done all this nonsense to sign all these different personalities and whatnot. It's if the Browns come into that game in contention, it's a different Browns team than what we're used to facing. And it's a different Cleveland fan base than what we could have. It will be much more difficult. It won't be impossible, but it will be much more difficult to get tickets from a Steelers fan standpoint to that game. It will be a much more partisan Cleveland crowd than what the Steelers have faced there in recent years. On the other hand, because the Browns do have they've got games at New England before us, not directly before us, but they'll have played the Ravens in Baltimore. They'll have had to make a trip to the 49ers. They'll have had the Rams before us. They'll have had the Patriots. They'll have had the Seahawks. So they'll have had a lot of common opponents that you would tend to think would put the Browns in a slight hole, even a better Browns. You'd still think that that's a tough schedule for them to wade through. Plus, they've got a game in in Denver, which is never easy for anybody because it's in Denver. It will depend. But if they come out of that set of games, this will be a very confident team, and that makes that 3-game stretch even more difficult. It's been a long time since we could have looked at a schedule where we had a Browns, and gone, yeah, the only gimme there is the Bengals. And we don't know that for sure. I'm not picking the game yet. I'm just saying it is. You have to look at that 3-game set and realize it is tougher than we're used to it being, potentially. We won't know until we get to it, but potentially that could be a tough span. Now, as you then indicated, we go to Arizona. We've got the Bills. And, again, the Arizona, we get the benefit of it being a late game. So that's helpful. It could be the difference here is if it's late in the year. So let's say they take Kyler Murray, number 1 in the draft. He may now be more integrated into their offense. That may not be as bad a Arizona team as they were last year. And then again, they may stink. We'll wait and see. The Bills, and then the Le'Veon Bell revenge game in New York before we close out the end of the year.
There's something
in Baltimore.
There's something to be said about how crappy this Le'Veon Bell revenge game on the road in New York at JetLife Stadium is, Brian. And you know why? They go to Baltimore. That's not necessarily the bad part. The bad part is that it's a Thursday night game. So that means the Jets get a mini bye before they get to host the Steelers. And it's on the road, but they get a few extra days of rest heading into week 16, which is just, garbage. So they have the advantage of not only playing at home, but now you end up having the Steelers, or you end up having the extra days to prepare for the Steelers. That sucks, man. I'm not a big fan of that. And then after you get done with that, then it's the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, which, eventually you got to play some of these divisional games at the end of the season on the road. So, I don't know. I'm never a big fan otherwise of the Ravens, and it's a hostile environment. I'm just hoping by the time we get to week 17 that this game is meaningless, and it very well could be. I know we always place our bets against the Ravens, and they tend to, do something otherwise.
Yeah, it's hard to count them out, except that we really want to. I mean, you look at that team right now as it stands, losing what they lost on the defensive side of the ball, and with the mess that they have on the offensive side of the ball, and even knowing that the draft is coming, you just cannot imagine them being able to sufficiently band-aid that team to be competitive. And yet they do it, but that's generally with Ozzie Newsome as the GM, and he's not there anymore. So we talked about this when we talked about the AFC North draft episode. This is a big season for the new GM there, and to see what kind of legacy or what kind of reputation he can start to build, because he's following up a very strong legacy by Ozzie Newsome. Now, it boggles my mind. It seems like forever since the Steelers have opened at home, but they've generally closed at home. This year, they don't open at home. They don't close at home. All their home games are sort of jammed in the middle of the season. I think it really does stink to have to play your last 2 games on the road, especially where they're going to play them. The New York game is the New York game. Unless something transcendental happens, I think the Jets are going to stink, and there's a good chance Bell's not even playing because he's hurt. So
or suspended.
Or suspended, yeah. That late in the season. But if he is playing, he'll have, his mojo will be running hot. He'll be doing some really bad freestyling in the locker room, and trying to get himself pumped up to play that game, because he'll want to prove the Steelers wrong. Now, be that as it may, ending in Baltimore is just ugly to me. I could not pick a worse place where I'd want to end the season than in Baltimore. And as all we can hope for is that they're resting their starters.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's hard to make a prediction here, but I'm going to say 14-2 before anything with the draft. I'd love to say they just sweep the AFC North, but who knows? And, then you're also looking at the 3 games at home combined with the bye week. So they're, in Pittsburgh for a month. Then they go on the road 5 of the last 7. That's the part that's not so cool. So I don't know how much more we got to say about this. It's going to be draft time right here. My mock draft, I don't know. I just hope some players, we talked about this in depth before about who the Steelers' first round pick can be. And it'll be an interesting thing because the mock draft article that I have that comes out tomorrow It's going to be a position we talked about that's been controversial, and I still get my guy that I wanted too. So take a look at that. Brian, you have the March of Dimes thing still going on. If people want to win a signed Rod Woodson helmet, the Real 26, tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. We've got until May 5th. This will be running. Again, if you haven't gotten your donation in and you'd like to get a donation in, you got plenty of time. But you should know that right now, even a small donation gives you a pretty decent chance to win the helmet. So, for every buck you donate, you get an entry into winning the helmet. The helmet will be given away on the 5th. You can look at our show notes underneath, and there will be the link to the donation page. You go in, you make a donation, you put SCU in the comments, you're in. We have had some folks donate, and we appreciate it greatly. But sure would hope that you guys can take a chance to win this very nice Rod Woodson helmet and support a good cause. Jump over and make that donation if you get the time, and we'll be giving that helmet away on the 5th.
Absolutely. So until then, a little bit shorter of an episode than usual, maybe. Yeah, a little bit, So we're saving it all for, final mock draft and also for draft day. So stay tuned to us in the coming week. And hopefully we have some other good news, and then we'll be able to actually give this a little bit more thought and see where teams have holes and where they've improved. And I still think there's, the AAF disbanded, and a lot of those players have already been gobbled up. But I think we're going to see where teams don't end up finding players in the draft. Let's say the Steelers don't find a running back, or let's say they find somebody in the very late round. I think they end up snatching somebody from that pro league or some other veteran that's been sitting collecting dust that hasn't signed in free agency. And I think you're going to see a lot of that type of stuff start to happen. So then we'll have a better idea, maybe mid-May, almost into June, for some of these off-season workouts and stuff like that, what these rosters are going to start looking like. So thanks again, buddy. And I'll be looking forward to the draft in just under a week now.
Yeah, can't wait. Again, as a brief reminder, our last mock draft episode will be Monday. We'll be recording that sometime over this weekend, and it'll be up on a Monday for you.
Yeah, well, we hope, as long as I don't end up on like something crazy happens to me. So it will be up on Monday, more than likely. So until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Brian, or Smokey and Bandit, or Bandit and Smokey, whichever way that worked. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.